This meeting to order, the Board of Franklin County Commissioners. It's 8:30, Wednesday, June 29th, 2022. Roll call.
Commissioner Waymeyer,
Present.
Commissioner Harris,
Present.
Commissioner Dickinson,
Present.
Commissioner Stottlemyre,
Present.
Chair Dunn.
President, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and standing for the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Morning.
I want to say thank you for the privilege of being able to come and pray with you. And I want to take a moment and say thank you for everything you do. Some of you, you do so much for us as a career. Some of you sacrifice time. As we celebrate in a few days our nation making a Declaration of Independence, I'd like to read a verse of scripture pretty familiar to you all. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 34. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. As we join our hearts together as a churchman and a statesman, we recognize that those two jobs are very different, but I hope they are never separate. I hope that as statesmen, you all always recognize your jobs individually as churchmen, and I hope that myself as a churchman never denied the right to be able to vote or to let my voice be heard in the affairs of men. But our jobs are very, very different. As a churchman, my job is evangelism. I'm here to preach the gospel to other sinners that they might be converted and to preach the word of God to bring light to all people. Your job as statesman is to order the affairs of people working together for the common good and the protection of those who are weaker and innocent. But as we work, as we both have our different jobs, one, I hope that as a churchman, I never have the powers of the state. Nothing would pervert me or make me powerless, worse than that. But likewise, I hope that you would always recognize the value of the guidance of the church that is preaching God's word. As a churchman and with the job of evangelism, I am responsible to acknowledge God in all that I do. But I want you to remind you that as statesmen, you too are responsible to acknowledge God in all that you do. Let us pray. Father, I thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to come and seek you to bless these people that work so hard for us. I pray that you will bless them in their work, as some of them, it's all day long, it's their career, and just let them be successful in what they're doing. I pray that you will bless those who sacrifice time to come and give leadership and help us make wise decisions. So I pray that you will give them all a spirit of wisdom and being able to make good decisions and to make decisions for goodness. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Any correspondence or there?
Yeah, we've got John Cohen with the Ottawa Chamber of Commerce here to discuss the Bike Across Kansas event and how that went. Thanks, Roy.
Okay.
Honorable Commission, County Administrator, I have varying gifts this morning.
Sure, I will. Thank you.
You actually have some left over after all those people?
We did have a few.
Thank you, John.
So, last week of Friday, a week ago, let's see, and if you'd pass these down too. There, you can just pass those down.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
On June 17th, we hosted 800 people in town, mostly from the state of Kansas, but actually from across the nation. I visited with several, some were from Florida, there were some from California, so this is kind of a big event. And so I thought our town showed well and appreciate the help that you guys provided. We gave every biking participant one of those bags, and it had a towel in there that they could use as a sweat towel. And then there's a green band in there, and that green band was able to access that set of deals on the sheet I passed out. Our downtown and different retailers and restaurateurs all provided those specials, and so with that green band, they were able to go. They could swim for free that day or go into the old train station depot museum. And that afternoon, we shut down Main Street from 2 to 5. Now, given it was 98 degrees that day, there wasn't a lot of people out there. We had some games out there. Not Lost Brewery separately had a beer garden, and they had a tent over it. And so there were some that took advantage of the beer garden and sat outside there. But more than anything, it was good to see how many of our downtown people had such good days. Dusty Gentry and at Not Lost told me it was the best day he's had since he's opened. And he drained 3 full kegs and was into a lot of others. And so they came thirsty. Pizza Time was full and waiting line, and so was El Sol, and Luigi's reported that they had good business that day, and so did Prime Time. So, and not most of them stayed out at the high school between the soccer fields and the football fields. They pitched tents. There was 40 tents out there, or they slept in the gymnasiums, and they opened up all 4 gymnasiums for them to use as showers, all 4 locker rooms and both gymnasiums. And then Ottawa University provided shuttle buses to and from the high school to downtown. We did have live music in the downtown on that day, and so it was kind of a festive occasion. And then at 6 o'clock, everybody moved over to Legacy Square where Travis Marvin performed. And I was surprised how many came down. We kind of were thinking the Travis Marvin might be more for our local people, but by and large, they were almost half the crowd down there that night. It was their last night. They were riding on to Missouri the next day, and then they'd be going home from there. So I guess they were ready to say goodbye and have a good time. And so it was a good crowd at Legacy Square that evening. The next morning, my wife and students and other teachers all served breakfast to about 500 of the bikers. So it was a big event. There was both egg casserole, and then there was a vegan option too, which, as it turns out, quite a few of them were vegan. So it was a big event. It takes a lot to host 800 people. There were 630 bikers, and then their support team. They actually started rolling into town at 10 o'clock that morning, which kind of surprised me because they came from Opie. So they do pretty good on those bikes. Of course, they straggled in all day. The last of them didn't get in till after 3 o'clock. Some of them just kind of take their time, and others of them get up and get on the road and try to get to their destination. Quite a few stayed in motels too, and some had camper trailers they were pulling. So all in all, I thought it was a good day. I thought Ottawa and Franklin County both showed well. You provided us help to provide the towels and bags, and so we greatly appreciate that. And they did too down at Legacy Square that evening and in the downtown and different restaurants. You could see those yellow bags everywhere, so it kind of identified them too. So anyway, one of them, I think every one of them told me, in fact, that I visited with, this hill outside of Ottawa coming in was just a killer. But of course, they hadn't seen the one going out yet either. So
Well, a lot of them spend a lot of time underneath that tree right at the end of my driveway.
yeah.
And a place to park.
Yeah, it about whipped them.
Sorry for them.
But anyway, I thought it was a good day. Really appreciate everybody's help. It was really a community event. Everybody helped, the high school, the university, the city, the county. And then we had a lot of volunteers that worked. And so we couldn't do it without a team effort like that, and really appreciate it. And just kind of wanted to give you that update. And we had a few of those bags left over, so we wanted to bring those as to show you what we had done, and then by way of giving you a little brief update. Does anybody have any questions?
John, who decides the route? Does it change every year?
It does change every year. It'd been 11 years since we'd hosted them last, and then before that it'd been 10 years. So, yeah, the Bike Across Kansas changed the route. We learned of the route in November. We learned we were on the route and were we willing to host. And so, in last November, we started, building a team where we could host that many people. And Dr. Cobbs, the superintendent, said no, he was willing to help. We would have gone to the university if he didn't feel he could do it, but he provided the school, and then the university was able to help with the shuttles. And so so we knew in November, but they don't officially announce the route until January, which is when they start the sign up. And there had been a 2 years hiatus for COVID. So the last time they rode, they had 800 bike riders. And so it was about 1,000 people traveling with the group at that time. This time, they didn't know what kind of response they would get after COVID, and they had 630, I think, was the total number of bikers. And so they were very pleased. And we'd actually been, in 2020, in 2019, we were going to be on the route for 2020, but that was canceled, and then 2019 was canceled, and so 2021 was canceled. So this route in 22 was very similar to the one in 20, but not exactly, because there was a couple cities that were willing to host back then, but they weren't willing to host this year. So they had to change it a little bit, but it's quite a bit of work, and so it's something that'd be hard to do every year, although I'd like to be given the opportunity to try, because like I say, I think it really boosted our economy for one day, at least, and that was good.
I can't imagine Opie being able to
Yeah.
host that many
I
people.
know.
Like, I mean, the chicken house must have been slammed, but.
Yeah, well, and they commented that Ottawa was probably their best stop. The only stop that was bigger than us was Hutchison, and that was almost now Hutchison did have a lot of activities, and they had a kind of vendors and street stuff going on, and they said that was good too, but they really said they felt the most welcomed here in Ottawa, that we were the best stop. And so, of course, we were the last stop too, and they were all ready to get home. So appreciate everybody and the support that everybody gave us, and feel free to reach out if you have questions or anything like that. But thank you for allowing me a few minutes here to.
Let's get them on the schedule every year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Roy.
You say that, Roy, but I've got to believe that the folks that participate in activities like this probably do all kinds of races and events, and if we made an impression on them, I've got to believe that they go back to their friends and organizers of other events and say, you know what, Ottawa took care of us. And I'm speaking for myself only, John, but I think this is exactly the kind of event that we should be trying to get more of in this community, being at the crossroads of these trails, and as an organization that promotes wellness and physical activity. I think it's fantastic, and I think if we can get more of this, then we should always be supportive of it, and so hopefully it does yield more. And I don't know if being the last stop, if that helped or hurt us.
Yeah.
Because if I've ridden a bike for however long, I'm probably pretty grumpy by then.
Yeah. Well, you'll notice in that bag that there's a card, and that came from Ottawa Bike and Trail. So Jeff Carroll was with the group the whole way from the border. He was providing support. He had originally signed up to ride, but then their team that normally provided support couldn't do it this year, so then they asked Jeff to provide a team for support. So he had his van out there, and they had to make a trip back to Ottawa several times to get parts and tires and stuff like that. But and the card in there is from Ottawa Bike and Trail on an event that he's promoting later on, and a lot of them knew Jeff, and so he's doing a lot to increase the biking activity in our community, so he does a good job too, and that's a great business to have in our downtown.
And he had a couple of pretty big events that he had to cancel because
Right.
of COVID, so
Yeah.
he's really working on it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Do they go the other direction from east to west?
I wondered that.
I don't know if they
Gone
go
that
east
way?
to west or not. That's technically would be uphill all the way, as elevation increases, I think.
Against the wind, because it seemed like all
Yeah.
of the weather comes from the west.
I've never known them to go that way, but yeah, makes sense. Yeah,
Good.
Thanks for the update on
Yeah.
that. That was a
John,
you bet.
who
Thank
did
you.
your bags?
Pardon?
Who did your bags?
Hasties.
Hasties did 'em?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Something, the car club had, because of China, all that stuff used to come, and I don't think anybody ever realized Hasties
Yeah.
did these. Well, that might be,
Yeah, well, I'm sure most of you've heard by now, we had to cancel our 4th of July display because we couldn't, the fireworks that we'd ordered and were promised didn't get here. We were notified in February that they were on a boat and on the way, and then 2 weeks ago, Tiffany Evans, the chair of that committee, was notified in an email that only half the shipment came, and I suppose their biggest customers were served, and we weren't. And so we're supposed to get them the last week of July or first week of August now, as it stands, which doesn't do us any good for 4th of July. And we've moved that celebration to Labor Day weekend so that, first of all, we don't have a method of storing those fireworks, a good method of storing those fireworks for a full year. And they were already paid for, so we were going to get them here and put on a display at Labor Day. But that was just another case, Don, of shipping issues that seem to plague us all right now in one form or another. So, then I'll mention too that August 12th, we're having another concert in downtown Ottawa, another free concert. Sons of Sterling is got another local connection. Their bass guitarist is Chad Kaler, whose wife is on the city commission, and Chad is a pilot and flies a lot out of the Ottawa airport. So invite you all down for that too. Hopefully the temperatures will be a little cooler by August 12th, and it'll be a good way to kick off the start of the school year and everything. So, you bet. Thank you.
Anything else, Derek, on?
I don't believe so. Thanks, Roy.
Any public comment
Nope,
today?
no one signed up.
Okay. On our consent agenda, we got claim vouchers in the amount of $103,618.78. We got tax change orders of a minus $7,731.68. Payroll for May 21st, 2022 to June 20th, 2022 of $1,186,542.78. Meeting minutes for June 15th and minutes from the study session on June 27th.
Move to accept the consent agenda?
Second.
Pick one.
All right. Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Dickinson,
Yeah.
Commissioner Stottlemyre,
yeah.
Commissioner Waymire,
Yes.
Chair Dunn.
Yes. Okay, first item up for business, consider approving a resolution increasing the tipping fees at the Franklin County Transfer Station.
Good morning, Commissioners. As we discussed on Monday during the study session, we are experiencing increased expenses at the landfill with the various things that we purchase, the expenses to haul the trash away. All those things have increased this year. And we also have multiple large projects underway. All of those things are contributing to our bottom line there. Although the operation is in solid financial status today, with these large projects and the increase in expenses, we want to make sure that we are in good financial standing tomorrow and down the road as well. It has been 9 years since we have updated our landfill fees, and staff is recommending that we increase the fees from, for the transfer station from $41 per ton to a total of $49 a ton, which is an $8 increase. And then for our C&D landfill tipping fees, we're recommending going from $31 per ton to $39 per ton. That is also an $8 increase. We're recommending leaving the minimum fee at $10. And then we're asking to raise the cost of of tires just a little bit as well. Passenger tires from $250 to $350 per tire. Truck tires, from $7 to $8 per ton, and then tractor tires from $25 to $30 per tire. Tires that are brought with rims would be double that fee. So if a passenger tire comes in and it has a rim on it, we would charge $7 per tire. In addition to those rate increases, we're also asking to change how we handle businesses that bring tires to us. Rather than on a per tire basis, we would like to charge those at $180 per ton. And then citizens bringing us 15 or more tires at once would be charged that same $180 per ton. Those are the recommendations from staff. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, we talked this over pretty extensively at our study session Monday. Does anybody have any questions or comments to David about this? Okay, it's affirmative motion would be, I make a motion to approve a resolution increasing the tipping fees at the Franklin County Transfer Station and CD landfill. This would be resolution number 2224.
So move.
Second.
Commissioner Dickinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stottlemyre,
Yes.
Commissioner Waymire,
Yes.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Chair Dunn.
Yes. This will be taking effect on September 1st, 2022.
Yes, sir. And we will, once we get the resolution signed, we will advertise that in the newspaper, a couple of different cycles, and then we will also send letters to each one of our commercial trash haulers so that they are aware and can make plans ahead of time for that.
Okay, thanks, David.
Thank you.
Next item, discuss use the American Rescue Plan Act, Arpa funds. Derek?
Yeah, thanks, Roy. So it's my intention today to walk you through the requests that we have thus far received for ARPA funds. One of the reasons that I've elected to do this today is that, as you know, we're putting together our 2023 budget. One of the options that was proposed by one of you, which, I think is a very viable option, is the opportunity to potentially defease some debt with this money. But if we're going to do that, then we need to get that into the budget prior to it being published. And so I figure we would start today with our financial advisor, David Artaberry, who can kind of talk us through what that looks like. And then after that, I can walk through the other requests that we've received. Now, I've let all of you know this, and I'll say it again. We have not formally solicited applications for ARPA funds. That's something that we can do if the 5 of you would like. These are just requests that we have received from folks that have heard that we've got these funds. So that's something you may want to give consideration to. But David, if you want to come up and talk about this defeasance, that'd be great.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I've got a handout for you that might look somewhat familiar. I think we talked about this a few months back. Was there. But what I kind of wanted to do is just kind of review with you how a defeasance of bonds works. and then talk to you a little bit about if you do want to proceed with it, what sort of steps you would need to go through to kind of complete the transaction. As I'm going through any of this stuff, there's a bunch of numbers here. I'm going to try to just point out the highlights, but if you do want me to dive into any of the more details, don't hesitate to chime in. If you turn to page 1 of this handout here, what you'll see on the right-hand side of the page is the remaining bond payments, or sometimes referred to it as debt service payments, due on your 2019 bonds. These are some bonds that were issued for improvements out at the new industrial park. And you'll see on that far right-hand column that the payments on those bonds, next year they're about $93,000, and then after that they ramp up to somewhere around $235,000, $240,000 per year, going out to the year 2038. In total, there's $3,649,000 of payments left on those bonds. That doesn't include a payment that you have due on August 1 of this year. I figured you're going to be making that payment regardless, but that's the remaining payments on the 2019 bonds. And the average interest rate on those bonds, kind of in the bottom right-hand corner, there's about 3.2%. Now, if you're going to pay off these bonds, or if you're going to defease them, you don't have to defease all of those future bond payments. All you have to do is provide for the payments up until their first call date, which is on August 1 of 2028. So if you look over there, just kind of to the left of the middle of the page, you'll see a column called DS to call. That's debt service to call. So that's the payments that are due on the bonds up until their call date in 2028. And then you'll see that big payment on August 1 of 2028. That's where all of the bonds are called. So that would be, that stream of payments there are the payments that would need to be provided for if you were going to defease the bond. So in other words, what we would be looking to do here is to put money into an escrow account, invest that money in the escrow account, and have that escrow account then spit out these payments in the debt service to call column. So the total amount there, if you look down in that yellow box on this page, is about $3,288,000. That's how much money has to come out of that escrow. If you flip over onto the next page here, this is an example of the securities that could be put into this escrow that meet that cash flow from the prior page. And these are special securities called state and local government series, which are treasury securities that are designed just for this purpose. They're designed to help municipalities defease or pay off old debt. And you'll see there in the little box in the yellow, kind of on the bottom right-hand side there, the total cost of those investments is $2.83 million. So if you were to take $2.83 million right now and put it into an escrow, and that escrow would then spit out enough money to pay off those old bonds. So that's kind of what how the defeasance would work. On the next couple of pages.
Can I stop you right quick, just for clarification? So if we put $2.83 million into an escrow account, that would be sufficient to pay off the $3.2 million or the $3.6 million in bonds?
Right, it would pay off the $3.2 million of debt service that is required on the bonds up until their call date, and then it would provide for the calling of those bonds on that date.
Okay.
That would then eliminate the county's entire responsibility to pay any of those bonds off. If you didn't do the escrow, you would end up paying over the term of the issue the $3.6 million.
And I suspect you've got the number in here of savings.
Yeah.
I'm about to walk through that.
Yeah, and actually, flip over to page 5 here. this sort of shows us very simple sources and uses. If you wanted to do this, this defeasance, I'm coming up with, you'd need about $2.855 million. That would include the $2,838,000 that would go into the escrow, and about another $18,000 to pay the transaction costs. Because you'd need to pay a trustee to hold this money on your behalf. That would be a bank. You'd need to pay, we would have the calculations verified to make sure that they're mathematically correct, that this escrow is in fact going to pay off those bonds. So you have to pay a verification agent. We have a fee, and your bond counsel would have a fee to provide an opinion that the bonds have been defeased. So that's what the 17.5 would cover. But if you were to do all that, down at the bottom, or kind of in the middle of that page, you'll see how much I calculate that this would save you. You know, if you did nothing, you would owe $3,649,000 of payments remaining on those bonds. It would cost you the $2.8 million plus issuance costs to set up the escrow. That would create gross savings over the life of the, from now to 2038 of about $793,671. So that's total savings that you could create over time by doing something like this.
So, and I'm going to paraphrase this, and David has certainly given us the 30,000-foot view, but if, and you cannot use ARPA funds directly to do this. We know that. But you can use ARPA funds for pretty much any government service you want. So for example, and we would have our consultant sign off on this, just hypothetically, if you wanted to go this route, we could use ARPA funds to pay for $2.855 million in payroll. With that payroll savings, we could apply that 2.855 to defease these bonds. That would not only result in an ultimate savings to the taxpayer of almost $800,000, what it would also do, if you look back on page, well, it's page 1, would free up, in 2023, it would free up $93,000 of room underneath our current budget to utilize for pay increases, for example. And starting in 2024, it opens up about $235,000 of room beneath our current mill levy. So in addition to saving almost $800,000, this would create room underneath our existing budget to allow staff flexibility to apply those funds for services and provide relief to the taxpayer. Does that make sense to all of you? What questions do you have for David?
Is there a correlation between the increase in interest rates as they're going up right now and doing something like this that we're
That's a good question.
we got 3% on these things?
Yeah, that's a good question, and the answer to that is yes, up until a point. The old bonds that are outstanding are tax-exempt bonds, and that means that the interest that's paid on those bonds, the owners of the bonds don't have to pay federal income taxes. As a result of that, there's a lot of IRS rules that govern when these types of bonds can get issued, and some of those rules also govern on what happens when you defease these bonds. One of the rules that they have is that if you ever are in a situation where you want to defease bonds, you can do that. You can put the money into an escrow account to defease bonds, but what they are saying is that you cannot invest the money in that escrow account at a rate of interest that is greater than the overall yield on that original bond issue. Now, these bonds were issued a few years ago, so they've had some payments now. The remaining interest rate on the bonds is that 3.2%, but the actual yield on the overall issue, was calculated when the bonds were sold, and it was about 2.92%. If you turn to page 4, and I apologize because the page numbers are pretty small there, you will see towards the bottom of the table there, you'll see something called yield to receipt and yield for arbitrage purposes. What this, the yield for arbitrage purposes is the maximum interest rate at which the IRS says that you can create this escrow and earn. In other words, you can't invest money in this escrow at a higher rate than that. The yield to receipt is what this escrow that I've got here actually yields. So you'll see it's just a shade, a hair under. So what this is saying is that this escrow is you're earning about as much as you can in this escrow. When I was here a few months ago, I think the rates were, the escrow that we looked at that time was only earning about 2.5%. So the escrow was actually costing a little bit more than it's costing now. Because interest rates have risen, you can now get a better return on that escrow. Therefore, you don't have to put as much money into it. Right now, you're at the highest earnings you can get in the escrow. The escrow will not get cheaper from this point, even if interest rates go up before you lock in the escrow account. So long-winded way of saying that by waiting and doing this, you've actually, the cost of doing it has actually gone down, but because of this IRS yield limit, it's not going to be going down any further. Did that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, the last number you brought us to defease this was actually more than the 2.8. So
Yeah.
I think if I pulled your last analysis, it was in the 2.9. So we have benefited because I had that on my desk, but it's went down tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, yeah, because of the increase in interest, overall interest rates, yeah.
Right. What else do you think is pertinent, David, that you would like to share with the board?
Just a couple things. First of all, the escrow account that you would set up, the way these are typically always set up is they're irrevocable escrow accounts. So when the money goes into the bank account, it is irrevocably pledged to the repayment of the bonds. That means that in the future, the county can't change their mind and come back and pull the money out of the escrow account. That's just the way, in almost all cases, these defeasances work. They're irrevocable. Once the money's put into an irrevocable escrow account, the bonds are legally considered defeased, and you no longer have to report them in your audit. So just keep that in mind. The other thing in terms of the steps that you would need to take, and I'd want to talk to bond counsel a little bit, but basically, I think the only thing that you're going to need to do to complete this is to approve an escrow trust agreement, which is the agreement that you would have between you and a bank where you would put the money into the account, the escrow account, and you would pledge the money towards the payment. So it's really not a lengthy process. I think there would really only be one step that you would have to do in terms of locking in the escrow. Before you do that, though, you'd have to obviously make a decision about doing that. And then we would come back with that escrow agreement at a later date.
In terms of timeline, roughly how long do you think, if we made the decision today, yeah, we're interested in this, what are you thinking?
A few weeks, to draft the agreement and acquire those state and local government securities.
And Janet, feel free to speak up, but for budgeting purposes, I don't think this needs to be completed before we file notice of our budget. We just need to know, I mean, if it's something you want to do, we can budget for it and the completion can come after that. But I think the pertinent step is just that decision being made by the five of you, so.
I think the only other thing I'd like to talk about, and I think I know the answer to this, but, so we have this obligation, and at this point, compared to the interest rates now, it's pretty low, but we are not anticipating having an obligation that we're going to have to borrow large amounts of money from. We're not looking in the future going, yeah, well, we might have to borrow $2 million to do this project or that project. Looking ahead. I mean, you
Yeah,
never know, but,
yeah, as I sit here, I don't anticipate borrowing money. I
so it's
think,
not like we're going to pay this off and then we're going to end up having to borrow more money for something else.
not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think we've got a team that is ambitious, and I love that about them, but I think that all of the plans that we've discussed, the intention is to budget for those improvements, those projects, and do it that way. So I am not anticipating taking out debt, provided something completely unexpected happening.
I was kind of thinking along the same line as I am, you know, if we didn't have some sort of capital project that came up and we didn't have those Arpa money, we use it for this. And we'd have to go outside and borrow money again, then we'd be up paying a lot more than 3%, I'm sure.
Yeah, right now, yeah, if you had a $3 million project you were looking at right now, you'd be better off using the available funds to pay for that project rather than do the defeasance, because the borrowing cost will be greater than 3% on that new project, yeah.
You know, what I could offer is, you know, I've got my public works director in here, the county sheriff is in here, and the county's ambulance director is in here, and I believe those are our three biggest departments. And certainly David and I have worked extensively on, you know, and we've talked with you extensively on the proposed plans for the shop and Old Highway 50, and we've got numerous plans in the hopper. But I don't, are any of the three of you aware of anything on the horizon in your respective departments that would necessitate the county issuing bonds? Because I don't believe that to be the case.
Barring a catastrophic event with one of our bridge structures, I don't foresee anything that we can't plan for. Obviously, if there are funds available, we've got a use for them. But I think that we've got a roadmap that we've established with you all. We've identified some things, and we are working towards those items in I think, an appropriate way. But barring any, you know, something that happens all of a sudden, I think we can work the plan.
And I'm seeing the sheriff and Christie kind of. Yeah, so we'll talk about the station, the potential station in Wellsville shortly, but thank you for that, Christie and Sheriff Richards.
Anything that we would anticipate in the future, I believe that we're in a stronger position as a county. Projects that happen, talked about some things that they're far enough off, but I believe that.
Thank you, Jeff. And I appreciate that. And I would tell you the backbone of our financial philosophy is to try and eliminate debt and avoid it. And that's why we make large reserve transfers every year, so that we have that there to use instead of having to issue bonds. So I don't personally worry about that. And if we were in that spot, I'm pretty comfortable saying it's because something completely unexpected and frankly catastrophic has happened. And in which case, you know, what do you do at that point?
$800,000 savings is a big number too.
That's a big number. One thing I will say about this before we you know, finish up with David and transition into the next part of the ARPA discussion is, I would like the board to consider, you know, that roughly 25,000 people in this community. We do have numerous requests, and I'm sure we could get more, but I don't know how many opportunities we could say literally would benefit everyone. Paying off debt or defeasing bonds, to be more legally accurate, and realizing a savings of $800,000, that equally positively affects every tax-paying citizen in this county. It's not a fun project where we're building something, but it's something that everyone would feel equally. That's $800,000 that doesn't get paid, and it creates additional flexibility in our annual budget so that that's that much less we would potentially have to adjust the mill levy. Just something to think about. Anything else for David? Or David, do you have anything else before we wrap this up?
Can't think of anything, no.
Thank you, David. I think, does anybody else have any questions on this?
Thank you for making this a 8-page thing and not a, and it made it very understandable. Thank you.
Well, no, I know that the software that we use to run those numbers puts a lot of numbers on the page, and it's always, I just try to weed through them and make sure we just focus on the important ones.
I say this, I feel like I say this every time David comes, but we're so fortunate to have him. Both him and Tyler Ellsworth are bond counsel. They're so good. And they take things that I will tell you are very complex and very nuanced. I mean, we're talking about specialty areas here, and they have a way of making it so intuitive and understandable. So thank you, David, for coming down and continuing to help us with all of this.
Well, thank you, and I think I've told Tyler this before. We have a lot of knowledge about an area that's not good for much of anything other than that.
That's right.
David, how time sensitive is this matter? Do we need to do something?
You know, the only sensitivity I would have is, I guess, in terms of your budgeting, you know, when you would need to know for budget purposes. But other than that, in terms of purchasing the escrow and that sort of thing, I don't think there's really any particular time sensitivity. I suppose there's a chance if you wait too long, interest rates could go back down, and it might cost a little more to purchase this escrow, but I don't envision that happening real soon.
I think you're hearing all of this, Janet, but I would think we would want to have this info in the next week or so, would we not?
Yeah, I need to have it as soon as possible so I can get it worked into our overall budget. And so, you know, I'll work with the team and figure out what that actually means in our budget, so we know how much we'll be budgeting in our bond and interest account moving forward, not just this year, but in the future, what that looks like, so we can convey that to you and to the public in the budget presentation that we do for the upcoming meetings.
And I said this earlier, I think Janet just we need that decision so that she can make the adjustment in the bond and interest line, and then we can legally, you know, consummate the transaction. After that, we just would need to know. So I would say that it's a discussion that, yeah, we'll finish the ARPA discussion, what we have right now today, and then, you know, as early as next week or maybe as late as next week, discuss this particular use of funds.
Okay. Cole, do you have anything?
What's our grand total ARPA funds available?
So, yeah, that's a great question, and I was about to get into that. We are allocated $4.961 million. We've used just over $300,000 on our premium retention pay. We've allocated another, you know, $87,000 for a jail van, $10,000 for the Ag Society for fairground upgrades, and $20,000 for a van for services for the elderly. That leaves remaining to allocate 4.5, a little over 4.5 million. I would tell you that if we're gonna proceed with Wellsville, and a 500,000 contribution there, that would take us down to 4. And the number that David's talking about is about 2.855. So you're looking at still having, roughly 1.15 million left in ARPA funds to allocate if we were to do this.
It's 2.85, but kind of in reality, since the savings, the cash savings, our first year's only in the 90s, and then it jumps up the next year to the 200s, we probably better, set aside, about 150 to help us with cash that first year to get us to our savings. Does that make sense? That way we don't, have to, I'll draw down our reserves or tax, that much more for 1 year and then take it back down and start kind of an uneven tax structure levy.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Colt. And Janet and I have discussed that, and yeah, we don't want to start that yo-yo, and I don't know that ARPA funds, I think we could probably use them for that 1 year bridge. Or we could look at, and you mentioned not drawing down our reserves, and fair enough, we could look at our reserve transfer though, and whether or not we just wanted to, for this 1 year, use frankly a small portion of that to build that bridge. But yes, we have options on what we want to do there, and certainly we'll discuss that with the 5 of you and take any input that you would provide. But that's a great point.
To me, our reserves are our next bond issuance. And, it's not fun to pay off debt. It's kind of even less fun to save money for something you don't even know what you're going to buy. And that takes even more discipline than, taking this found money, this one-off money and paying off debt. It takes even more discipline to save up money for something you don't even know what you're saving for, which, for us, maybe new wind dumps, it may be, who knows? So,
sure.
But that's the debt that's really going to save us money when interest rates are even higher.
Yeah. Well, and we can talk to our consultant about, if I understand what you're asking, Colt, is can we pull an additional 150-ish from ARPA to use as that bridge? And certainly that's something that our consultant with Whit O'Brien wants another contract because technically we don't have one with him for ARPA. So that's something I need to discuss with the 5 of you, but provided there's no hangups there, then we'll run that through him as well. But yeah, I suspect with as lenient as ARPA is compared to the CARES Act, I suspect there's a way to do it.
Yeah, what I'm kind of suggesting is to pencil this issue, this debt defeasance in at an even 3 million, so we leave ourselves 150 to get through that first year.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand that, and yeah, we'll absolutely look into that.
Well, there's been a very good discussion about this. Do you have anything else, Derek?
No, I don't think so. Just thanks, David.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
you very much.
Keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely will. We'll be in touch.
If we have another contract with Whit O'Brien, then what does that cost us?
Still trying to ascertain that. Whit O'Brien threw a number out. I don't know that it's palatable, so I need to call him and discuss that with him. But obviously, that's something that the 5 of you will make the decision on. And that's just insurance for this organization we think ARPA is, based on the final rule, we think it's far more lenient than the CARES Act was, but Whit O'Brien did a great job of guiding us through the CARES Act and that minefield, and so certainly, I'm confident in them, but we can have that discussion. Moving on, so, if and I'm not taking this for granted, but if the board wants to, contribute to the Wellsville ambulance station at the 500,000 that we've discussed, that puts us at 4 remaining to allocate. If we, hypothetically utilize an even 3 for this debt defeasance, that puts us down to 1. Now, what are the other requests that we have received? From outside of the county, we've heard from Rural Water District number 4. We've heard from Rural Water District number 6, and they have just various rural water related projects. Number 4, I don't believe asked for a specific amount, but they want to drill a well or something, I believe is the nature of that project. Rural Water number 6 did give us an estimate, and it's around $170,000 to assist them with one of their projects.
Is it outside of the county?
No, I don't think those. I meant just projects that are not within.
Oh, within the county. Okay, I was like, outside, why are we paying for outside the
No,
county?
no.
Gotcha, okay.
So I've got
All right.
2 lists. One that would be like public works projects.
Gotcha.
The
Okay,
other,
okay.
which would be projects that.
All right, gotcha.
We've heard from United Way about funds for the homeless, potentially a permanent shelter. I know that, and I don't know that this is still in the works, but I know that Paul Bean has referenced using Arpa funds for a potential childcare facility. And I don't know if you still have anyone. You're shaking your head, so that, it sounds like, is no longer a request. We've heard, we've received a request, and Janet, you might chime in on specifically who you got this one from, but partnering with the Pathways Grant on a bike share program at Ottawa University. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm on that Pathways grant team, and Sheila Robertson is the chair of that committee. And so Pathways is currently funding a bike share program at Ottawa University, but Pathways isn't going to last forever. They've seen some real success in transportation around the area of the students, and they're able to not only go back and forth between different events that they have, whether that's, different dorms or housing options around town, but also been able to utilize our businesses far more than they had before by getting out to Walmart, getting out to Price Chopper, getting downtown to Corner Market and Mugshot to have coffee. So that was brought up in one of our Pathways meetings that maybe ARPA funds could go to fund this program long-term, actually buy the bikes outright, because the bikes, as my understanding, are being leased through a company in Kansas City. So we don't have a price on that, but just something that Sheila wanted to throw out on our ARPA list to discuss.
Thank you for that, Janet. And again, I'm going to say it again. We have not formally solicited requests at this point, but that well, let me rewind. Paul, I know you and I have sat down with a couple of broadband internet companies. Again, a specific request wasn't made, like for a certain amount of funds or for a specific project, more of just a, hey, if Franklin County is going to dedicate funds for this purpose, we would be interested in looking into that and applying for that. So what we've received is generally fairly vague, but that could be literally the result of the fact that we haven't formally solicited these. But that's the extent of the out-of-county requests that have been brought to my, out of the organization requests that have been brought to my attention.
I know have talked to you, and I believe that you have also about City of Princeton. Yeah.
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 And yes, let me throw that in. You're right, Ian, that's not on my list. The city of Princeton, and that is a drainage project, is that right? Yeah, and they've requested funds for that as well. Paul, can you think of anything else that? Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Do you think that broadband is going to be something that the state is going to put on their plate?
I have no idea. I mean, I think that as we continue to advance forward and technology continues to become a more prevalent part of society, yeah, I think it's certainly possible. But I also think that, there's, satellites being launched up into orbit that are designed to provide internet to rural areas. And I think a person could argue that that's the future of rural broadband internet, not, but.
KDOT has part of their initiatives going forward. Some of the money that they're getting from the federal government is being put towards broadband in their right-of-ways. And so their projects that they are letting across the state have a component of that with the goal of expanding that access across the state using state right-of-ways. That's, from the state perspective, that's all I'm aware of.
And at this point, if we do diffuse debt, $1 million is not going to go anywhere for broadband, really. I mean, for what the total cost could be.
Well, I would tell you that the 4.5 million won't go anywhere for broadband.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at wanting to provide broadband internet to the entire county, you're looking at a vastly larger expense than that. So then you're effectively saying, okay, which part of the county do we want to prioritize? And that comes with its own issues.
So the construction projects that we're foreseeing coming up and say the project out at the Public Works Department, can some of this money be put toward them projects?
Yeah, so.
No, I'm asking, so, and then I guess, and my thought is you're back to helping all the taxpayers if we can get it this way instead of just ear tagging them.
Yeah. So yes, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Before I transition to those, one more that at the very bottom of my list here is COFO reached out to me a long time ago about partnering with them on an emergency generator so that if, things go down, they have a generator so that they can continue operations and help us in emergency situations. And the quote, and it's dated at this point, but was somewhere around $25,000. So that's another thing for consideration. In terms.
Derek, if I could just add really fast.
Go ahead, Janet.
If I could just add really fast. So I sit on a lot of Arpa discussions with other counties and, different avenues that I have. And they've discussed a lot about, projects are continuing to be released from the federal government to help fund these things like water projects, sewer projects, road projects like we've discussed with David. So I think there are going to be other opportunities that we have to help our different organizations in the county tap into funds. So we're constantly watching those and getting information out as we can. I did tell a couple of our rural water districts to go ahead and reach out to the Office of Recovery too, because there are some water project funds that are coming available that they would have access to. We don't know what the details of those are yet and how much money would be available for them, but on the calls I've been on, that has been indicated to me. So I am trying to continuously keep those folks updated on resources that they could tap into.
Yeah, Janet, I appreciate you adding that. That's a great point. Like, we are not the only option available for rural water districts. And David, I know you and I have talked about this extensively. There is this quote unquote infrastructure bill that is still hanging out there. But we do believe that rural water districts will have the opportunity to apply for funds pursuant to that. I think Janet is wise to refer them to the Office of Recovery. I certainly don't believe that Franklin County is the only option for the rural water districts within the county proper.
And how long do we have to spend these?
Years.
So, I mean, it's not like we have to decide even in this year what we're going to do with the rest of the funds, but we just need to decide if we're going to defease debt just because of the budget.
The debt defeasance, we need to know.
But the rest of it, we don't have to.
No, I mean, I think Wellsville's one that we've.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yes, if we're looking at having $1 million-ish of ARPA funds that are remaining, no, and I want to say you have until like 2027. It's not.
And by then we might know what they're doing with the infrastructure money, and City of Princeton might be able to get some money or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get back to Rod's question, because excellent question, and I'll turn it over to David shortly. But internal county projects that haven't been, and you've got to remember, we are able to effectively utilize CARES Act funds to take care of a lot of stuff. You've got Centropolis sewer that continues to come up, and potential needs out there. The road and bridge yard, we could do any portion at this point. Like, they've opened ARPA up so much. We thought it was going to be more restrictive at first, but since they've allowed us to claim an allowance for loss of revenue, any piece of that David has put in front of you, you want to add buildings out there, you want to pay for engineering out there, you want to dig retention ponds out there, you want to pay for landfill expansion stuff, old Highway 50, any of that at this point is fair game with ARPA funds. And I'm sure David could walk you through any number of specific projects, and if you would like, we can, but just know that anything we've discussed could absolutely be used. And I think Rod's logic is rock solid. That maintains your ability to say, look, Public Works touches all four corners of our county. Using funds on that touches all of the taxpayers. So, thoughts?
Did you have another request from the city of Rantoul?
City of Rantoul. Was it
That's the bathroom project that's listed on there, Derek, that we've discussed before.
It's a partnership deal, Pathways.
Okay, so you'll have to elaborate on that.
I'll give you what you sent me.
Derek, that was on our list. That was the restrooms at the ball field.
Okay. So, yes, so Rantoul has made a request for restrooms at the baseball fields, and I apologize for not getting that on this particular list. That's about a $20,000 give or take expense to do that as well.
But it's already partially funded through Pathways too, so we're not asking for the whole thing.
Yeah.
The whole cost.
Don, do you remember what portion is going to be funded through Pathways? I don't recall that.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't know, it's on the deal, that's all I know.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I have in front of me what portion is going to be funded by Pathways, but this quote that I'm looking at is about $29,000.
Look on the very back page.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look like that info was in here. But again, at that if we're looking at $25,000-$30,000, those aren't decisions that necessarily need to be made today, and we would have still $1 million outstanding if, things like COFO generator, this project for Rantoul, partnering with the Pathways grant on the bike share program at Ottawa. I mean, all of this could be accommodated really easily with those funds.
And Derek, if you're looking for, I guess, input on the remaining, the balance of those funds, I think the logic for putting it towards public works projects is, rock solid. It absolutely is a consistent, use that would benefit everyone in the county. It's very logical, and I would be towards moving the remaining balance of the funds to public works capital reserve, or towards a project in public works.
And I appreciate that input, Cole. What I would say is that we don't have to make that decision today. And frankly, even if the 5 of you want to do that, and that's perfectly fine, with each individual project and each individual use of those funds, we would have to bring it to you for your approval anyway. So even if we wanted to use all $1 million, that's going to be split over, I would assume, various projects, and that will all have to come to you for. So if that's something you all feel, then we'll take that guidance, but it's not a decision that has to be made right now.
Sure. Well, if any of those applicants or people are looking for an answer or direction, or, I guess that's where I would be.
Okay. I mean, what are your thoughts on the debt defeasance?
I think we need to do it.
I mean, I feel like I've got Colton Rod certainly.
I like the idea of the debt relief. 800,000 is what a chunk of change.
I like the debt relief because we really have to take care of our employees, and without it being a burden to the taxpayers, we're trying to think outside the box, so.
Yeah, it helps.
I think we have time to think about all the other stuff at a later date. I think we need to move on now.
Well,
nobody has any objections?
Well, Don, do you have any comments on the?
It sounds like we're going the right direction. It's something we got to think out, but anything that would be, like Rod said, anything out there would benefit everybody. So,
Okay.
that's always, and then with David too, and that helps everybody. So,
And
you're going to have the other things, like we're going to talk to him about, that help everybody,
Yeah, okay.
Cole, do you have anything else?
No. No, I don't.
Okay.
Well, and what I can do then is we can proceed, and there'll have to be formal steps taken, as you know. We can proceed towards the debt defeasance, and I will refine this list of other requests so that we can try to get hardened amounts, just so that you have it from all of the interested, and we can discuss that at any point from next week to 2027. We've got a little bit of time, so. Okay, thank you, Roy.
Okay.
The only thing about waiting to 2027 is some of these projects, people need to have to make decisions on, and so they don't really want to wait till 2027. But anyway, that's it.
I'm sure there'll be a lot more requests coming in, I would guess, now that people know more about it. So, anyway, let's go on to the next discussion about emergency medical services budget.
Christy, you want to come up?
Good morning.
Morning.
And I believe Amy should have handouts for all of you. Do you have those in front of you? We're in a different setting this morning, but I have no intention of approaching this any differently than we've approached any of the others. So If you have specific questions on her budget, I think, please ask them. I think, her personnel line includes raises commensurate with what we've done in the other departments. Her increases, she got an increase, as you can see, for motor fuel, which is predictable. What questions do you have for Christie? Or Christie, conversely, what would you like to talk to the board about?
This is my first time being through a budget hearing, so please bear with me. I don't particularly have any questions for you.
Do we have any questions for Christie? Maybe that'll help.
And I'll tell you, I'm not concerned with this budget at all. Janet, do you have any special considerations on this budget that you would like to share?
Janet, you still
No,
there?
I don't.
Okay. You have any problems with the budget? Janet, questions?
No, I don't have any considerations on this.
Okay. Cole, you have anything?
No, I would, I guess, just mention, we talked earlier about this being one of our bigger departments, and if there's any chance of, debt being generated from here, but the revenue generated from the ambulance department always has and covered their capital needs and replacement for sure for their equipment and vehicles. So.
There is a note here about overtime that you are concerned there might not be enough.
That was something that we had talked through when we had our budget hearings. I just wanted to make sure that overtime was figured into, since it's part of their routine salary, I had just made sure that it was figured accurately.
Yeah, and I believe we've got that.
It was.
Yeah.
After review with Amy and with Janet and Derek sitting down, it was figured correctly.
Okay.
I know we talked to you a little bit a while back about the EMTs and the paramedics and reorganization of the shifts, I would guess you'd call it. Is that working?
So fortunately, we were able to hire 3 EMTs, and we do plan on hosting an AEMT program here in the near future. That'll be something that Assistant Chief Bardwell and Division Chief Hogan facilitate. We'll have to get state approval for it. It's kind of a long process to get it actually started, but we have done them successfully in the past in-house. But paramedics are just in short supply.
Have we talked about fees? Are fees nominal or competitive or whatever?
So Derek and I had talked briefly about service fees, and that is something that the Mid-America Regional Council actually publishes the user fees or the service fees for surrounding counties, and that is something that I'm going to be reviewing with our office manager to hopefully come up with an increase for 2023.
Okay.
So it is something that, we're discussing.
Okay. Any questions?
No.
Colt? You good?
Nothing, thank you, Roy.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now we'll discuss planning and building, environmental health, and Centropolis sewer budgets. Derek or Kenny or whoever wants to talk about
I
this.
can open this up. I think that Christie's, for as self-explanatory as Christie's budget was, I think Kenny's are more so. There's nothing here that concerns me, frankly, at all. And you'll note that the increases are modest and they're just tied to salaries that, again, are commensurate with what we're doing in other departments. So I'll let you all ask any questions of Kenny that you have, but I can't say I'm concerned.
This is a good-looking budget, oh my goodness.
Oh, I was asked the same question about fees and, that sort of thing. Are they
Yes, that's something that we've started looking through and comparing ourselves to some other surrounding communities in regards to planning fees and building permit fees. I think from what Pat has sort of done for me so far on the building permit fees, when you compare us to other communities that also have, full inspection services, we're significantly behind where other communities are. And so I think that is something, he has prepared sort of a proposal for me that I'm still working on and trying to get through on the planning fees as well. But I think that's something that will probably be coming before you guys before too long to look at increasing those. I think it was looking like probably, I would say, a significant increase from where we're currently at. But I think with where we've sort of looked at being at, we would still probably be 3/4 of where other communities' fees are. So not necessarily trying to get up equal to other communities. I'd say we're of course in a little unique position where some of the communities we might sometimes more compare ourselves to don't necessarily have building inspections, and so their building permit fees are more flat rate of, $50 or something. But definitely when you compare it to city of Ottawa or Miami, Johnson, Douglas counties, that there's a pretty significant difference. If I remember the numbers correctly right now, like a normal permit fee for us for a $400,000 house that's like 4,000 square foot in size, I think maxes out at $750, where other communities are probably more over $3,000 for a similar type of construction. So on the planning side, I would say some of our fees are comparable. Probably no significant increases there. I think the items that we're maybe a little bit more out of step on would be our lot splits and boundary line adjustments. Our current application fee is $30 for those, and a lot of other communities are higher than that to sort of cover time and stuff that's associated with those. So yeah, we'll hopefully before too long have that put together and have some more discussions on those in the future. So. And I guess on the planning and building side, most of mine was just sort of reallocating to try to get things matching where our expenses were. I think generally we've always come in the black for our end of the year expenses, but wasn't always matching with where we were spending money. And so a lot of my changes have just been reallocations to try to help us track things a little bit better for where our costs are. The only things I would mention, I think right now I have a little bit of concern in regards to fuel costs, but from what we had budgeted last year, I'm hopeful that we had enough additional that will still be good, depending on what happens in the future. The only things that I would say would be more towards the future would just be, if the county would ever decide to go forward with updating our comprehensive plan or codes court or something like that. Those would be some things that would definitely probably need adjustment from our current budget, but I'm sort of anticipating that those are probably not necessarily in the next year budget. I think that's a little bit farther out.
Well, and even if it is, that those are probably expenses that I don't know that we would place in Kenny's budget. I mean, those are kind of one-off things that we would utilize another fund for anyway. So, and we have the resources to potentially do that. So I don't know that we would ever, and maybe we would, but I don't know that we would ever put updating a comp plan, for example, in his budget because, you know, we talk about creating that yo-yo. I think there's reserve funds. That would probably be a more appropriate use, so. Any questions for Kenny on any of his budgets?
Cool. Janet, do you have anything?
No, I just add that Kenny talked about additional revenue in his budget that he could get from building permit increases and things like that. I'll just remind you that those go into the general fund revenue. And likewise, Kenny is in the general fund as a whole. So, you know, if there are additional things that he needs, we can compensate for those in the general fund. So
The only thing you had was environment health truck possibly needing a replacement.
It is pretty old, and I think we have started these last couple of years having fairly more maintenance issues on that. So I think that is something that's here before too long we're going to have to figure out. I think we've also had some discussions because, you know, I do currently have a truck which I use relatively often, but you know, maybe also looking at ways that sort of, I think, like what we did for Pat. You know, we did a sort of a smaller vehicle for him that gets a little better gas mileage. So it might even be, you know, if we move forward with something, it might be, I don't necessarily need a full-size truck for what I do. And so there might be some other options there, so.
Okay, any
I
other
think
questions? Okay.
I think the fees are probably worth discussing before too long, the user fees. I don't think that there's such thing as a building permit fee that's so low that it, you know, generates or creates economic activity. Nobody's going to drive down to Franklin County because our permits are really cheap. On the other side of that, though, I do think obviously a municipality could, you know, make fees so high that it kind of frustrates people, and they finally just say, you know, it's not worth doing business here. But obviously, we're nowhere near that. Ultimately, I think the balance is trying to generate enough fees where, you know, the countywide, the public's not basically subsidizing somebody to build their new house. Well, at least too much. We're always going to have to put some ad valorem dollars in that department, but there's certainly a public benefit to, you know, the sanitarian and building new safe structures. So that's fine. But like I say, finding that balance that's probably a conversation worth having pretty soon.
Okay, thank you, Cole. Anything else for Kenny about his budget? I guess we're good. That concludes our business for today. Go on to staff reports. Derek, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I just real quick, thank the five of you for your willingness to be open-minded and creative in terms of how we operate as an organization. I think that it's not always easy to do. You know, I think these are hard times, and you know, it'd be easy to just point to inflation and rising costs everywhere else and say, you know, well, we have no choice. We've got to raise this or raise that. But the five of you continue to demonstrate that you're willing to look everywhere and look hard and get creative. And I think Arpa is a great example of that. I think that's a great decision by the five of you, so I'll commend you on that. The only other thing is the city of Ottawa has requested to meet regarding Proximity Park and a labor shed study that Paul had commissioned. Initially, they wanted to meet on the 20th. That no longer works. Now they're looking at the 13th of July. Is that something that the five of you would be interested in sitting down? And I think Paul would lead the discussion probably just to go through the results of that and then have a greater discussion about development and Proximity Park.
Fine with me.
What was that date again?
July 13th.
The Wednesday, right?
Okay. All you have, Derek? Everything
Well,
else?
I think I've got, Ian, are you
Yeah,
checking?
yeah.
Okay,
I'm putting
okay.
it in my calendar.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay. Yeah, no, that's, Roy, that's all I have. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to add some stuff?
Morning, Commissioners. Just a couple of things. As Derek just indicated, we did get a housing study completed, so I'll give a report on that finding, just as was mentioned. On July 12th, from 4 to 6 at the Speakeasy on the old post office, FCDC's working with the city, and we're inviting developers and contractors to come and hear from Ryan Vincent. He's the executive director for the state of Kansas Housing Corporation. He's going to come and share information about the legislation that was passed in the latest session from the state for tax incentives for moderate and income housing. And so this is an effort to get developers and builders to come and hear what those incentives are, meet with the city folks as well, and try and entice some folks to come down and do some housing developments of different types. As we all know, that's a big challenge, which the labor shed study reinforced, by the way. So that's on July 12th. So if you'd like to come to that, you're certainly welcome to. And I can share more information on that. And then, of course, just, people always want to know what's going on with the Proximity Park. And all the uncertainty in the economy right now and all that's going on in the world has really slowed things down. And actually, if I get through tomorrow without a lead, this will be the first month since for 2.5 years that we haven't gotten at least one lead during the month. So it's really slowed down, and I kind of anticipated that would be the case with the markets and inflation and what's going on in Ukraine. There's so much uncertainty that we're seeing industry expand, kind of like we saw with Calmar doing here in town. They're seeing some of that up to the north of us, but tremendous slowdown in industry looking to build new operations just because of the uncertainty. So I think that'll probably carry for a while. So we continue to market as much as we can, but just want people to know that that's kind of where we're at right now with activity on Proximity Park. Not what we want to hear, but I always just want to be transparent. So happy to answer any questions.
How'd the social go?
Social was great. We had over 30, I think we had around 35 folks show up. People had a really good time. I had a couple of them say, boy, this was nice. I could meet some people I hadn't met and kind of network a little bit. So that continues, I think, to grow. We'll do that every year. So, but yeah, it went real well. Thank you, Roy.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Chris, do you have anything else, or Kenny? Dustin? No, sir. David?
This morning, I thought I would give you an update on some of the projects that we have ongoing. The chip seal project was supposed to start right after the 4th. That's pushed back a little bit with all the weather that has occurred so far this year. The contractor's a little behind. Still waiting on firm dates on that. The Osborne Terrace Bridge Replacement Project, we were scheduled for an October letting. Due to the redesign that we had to undergo, KDOT has, which I think is a really good thing, they have pushed that back to the February letting of 2023. So that gives us a little bit of breathing room, get the plans finished up, and get the right-of-way acquired and those sorts of things that we still have to do. The plans are to KDOT right now, and they're being reviewed. So I feel like with the February date, we're in really good shape to be able to make that happen. The other ongoing KDOT project is a local road safety plan. That project, the consultant has, they've acquired all the available crash data for our county. They have been around and viewed all the roads associated with this project, and they are moving forward with that. One part of this project is in all of the counties that they do this in, they hold a safety workshop. And in that safety workshop, we want to invite all stakeholders, which would include, some of my senior staff, some commissioners, other stakeholders like school districts and their transportation staff, EMS, sheriff's staff, those sorts of folks that utilize our road system. And at that meeting, the consultant will talk about the crash data that they've acquired and analyzed. They'll talk about the impact of that crash data, how severe it is, those sorts of things. They'll talk about mitigation, those sorts of things as well. And so we'll get really a firsthand look at what the end result is going to be of their report. So it's a good opportunity for us to hear that. It's just a couple hours long, probably. And so we've got a schedule of Monday, July 18th at 1 o'clock in this room. And so I'll be working with Derek, and we'll get invites out to the appropriate parties and those sorts of things here in the next week or so. And if you recall, getting through that local road safety plan opens us up to another funding source, which is the high-risk rural roads. And I anticipate in my initial discussions with KDOT representatives about Old 50, based on what I've told them, they feel like that funding source is going to be the one that would be most appropriate for Old 50. So this project, getting it done and getting that in the book, so to speak, will allow us to apply for funding for Old 50. Speaking of Old 50, they are very near the end of they've about got the plans ready for that. And so I'll be meeting with them coming up and getting that finalized, but they've done what they said they were going to do. They're going to have plans ready for us to be able to submit on the funding application. And so we'll have, we've talked about having plans on the shelf. We're going to have them. And so we'll be ready to go right away with KDOT if they accept us as a project. So that's really good news. Let's see. Pat and I mentioned meeting with Hams. I had the date wrong the last time I mentioned it. We're actually going to meet in just under an hour up in Lawrence to kind of talk through what's going on with our landfill, the projects that we have. We'll talk about these landfill fees and those sorts of things, and I'll get a better understanding of what's happening with the Hams landfill and their operation overall as well. And I'll certainly share those things. And lastly, coming up, and I don't have the dates exactly, but KDOT is going to be holding a 2-day workshop, conference, however you want to call it, specifically related to the federal funding dollars that are coming down. They have studied that, and they're inviting county representatives, city representatives to come to this 2-day meeting to learn more about it and how we can apply for those funds and what steps we have to go through, what the existing KDOT programs are going to be adding money to those programs, which opens up more opportunity for us. Kind of speaks directly to what we discussed just a little while ago. And so I'll be there collecting that information and bringing it back and helping us make good decisions on how we want to move forward with the projects.
And I might just chime in. I'm glad David's going to that. I think he's a perfect ambassador to send down to that. And what I might also do, and this could be Paul, it could be Janet, but just have them just notify the towns and the rural water districts that this seminar is occurring, so that, because we just discussed these federal funds being available, so that each of their organizations could send a representative as well. So yeah, I think that's going to be a good use of time. It'll be good to get KDOT's perspective on all of it. Sorry, David.
No, that's exactly right. We want, as many people to hear this information as possible so that, we can all make good decisions. I will say what I know about it, what I've heard about it through some of the KDOT meetings I've already attended. There's not, all of those federal dollars, they're going to be programs available. They've expanded programs. We're going to be able to apply and compete directly for those projects with the feds and not have to go through. But the administration of all of those funds is going to remain the same. There's a lot of things that KDOT does for us on those federal dollars. We'll still have to follow those same rules and regulations. So it's not necessarily going to be like the ARPA funds where they give us an amount and then give you broad latitude in how you spend those dollars. And so things have to be very targeted, and we will have to follow through with the specific steps and the reporting and all of those things. Still a great thing. It's just going to take a little more effort and work to be able to acquire those dollars and use them. But we have lots and lots of needs, and by all means, when it's appropriate, we should look to use those follow those avenues to get those dollars.
David, do you, we brought up Widow Bryan's earlier and trying to negotiate an agreement with them do you envision, would you find value, I guess, in having them on board to help with that process?
I would love to talk to them about their thoughts in that matter. I think that, if I've learned one thing with going through the FEMA documentation, we have a very small staff to be able to tackle those things, and those are very somewhat time sensitive, but they fill a lot of time to get those things done. Not impossible, but having a professional on board to help us through that process is well worth the expense of it, and I would very much appreciate the opportunity to visit with them.
I don't know what that would look like, full disclosure, because with like ARPA funds and with CARES Act funds, we got an allotment, and they were paid out of that allotment. Now, on something like this, where you apply for specific projects, we would have to ascertain what the fee mechanism is, but just wanted to throw that out.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think that's all, other than, the regular road work that is ongoing. We've got a couple of road projects. We're working on Douglas, a section of Douglas Road east of Nevada, where we're rebuilding ditches, rebuilding the road. We've also got a project on Oregon, north of Haskell Terrace, doing the same thing. So we've got all of our equipment and all of our personnel assigned to those projects. And in fact, I think we've only got one truck right now delivering rock because all of our other personnel are tied up on those projects, which is kind of what happens whenever we get these road projects. So it's all hands on deck right now, taking advantage of the good weather.
I had one question about Eisenhower Road and what arrangements we have with the city and how that project's coming along.
Yeah, so we teamed with the City of Ottawa and also KDOT the local KDOT folks. Each one of us had equipment and personnel. The city and the county purchased some rock to, if you've been out there, you've seen some additional rock on the shoulders. So we worked that out. And we worked together to take care of the shoulders all the way from Old 50 up to K68. We had planned to do that starting the day that all the bicycle folks came in. And after a few discussions, our superintendent and the city superintendent decided that it might be a good idea to push that off. And so we waited till the following Monday to do that work, and we finished it up the following Tuesday, I think. I think it was a 2 or 2.5 day project to get that done. But we worked all the way through there, all of us working together. It was very helpful. I was listening to the communication between all the parties, and they worked really well together. Each independent department, the equipment and personnel, worked hand in hand, and we were able to make improvements to those shoulders on that entire stretch.
Okay, thank you, David. Janet, do you want to talk to us about anything?
The only thing I'd let you guys know is that our ballots are all finished, and we're going to be putting those out on the VoterView website, which is accessible either from the Franklin County Clerk and Elections page or from the Secretary of State's office page also, where you look up your voter registration. It will pull up the ballots that will be available to you on Election Day. So those ballots will be ready. Just a reminder, because I want to remind everyone as many times as possible, everyone will have a ballot in the August primary. So not just party-specific ballots, but there will be a nonpartisan ballot for that constitutional amendment. So those are complete. We're getting ready to do all of our logic and accuracy testing on the ballots. So we will be ready to go. So we're getting a lot of advanced ballot applications in. So if anyone has any questions about how to receive an advanced ballot in the mail or what our early options are, they can feel free to call my office and we will get those details to you. We will have the early voting times out online here shortly, and we'll try to get those pushed out on social media too, so that everyone has the opportunity to vote early. We will have a Saturday that you can vote early. We'll have some evening hours, so we've got a lot going on right now as far as elections.
Thank you, Janet. Debbie, do you have anything for us? Okay. Colt, do you want to start us off since you're out and about?
All right. Not a lot. Attended the Elizabeth Leighton Center Finance Committee meeting yesterday, which is a subcommittee of that board. Attaining CCBHC status is going to be, in my mind, kind of critical for the future of Elizabeth Leighton Center to continue operating as they do. It wasn't a great month financially for them. They do have good reserves, so there's no disaster imminent to that organization. But long term, attaining that CCBHC status is going to be kind of critical for them, and that's quite a process, and it's down the road. The labor continues to be a huge problem for them. They need providers to generate revenue, to make money, to do a little better than break even ultimately, ideally, and that's where the problem starts. I think there are 18 providers down, going off memory, between the two counties, and that's a lot for that organization. So need people just like the rest of us. That's generally the state of Elizabeth Leighton Center. That's all I have to share today.
Okay, thanks, Cole. Aya?
The Prairie Paws Finance Committee met last Thursday. They're starting to be able to do some fundraising like they had in the past, which is helping their finances, and they continue to try to find ways to cut their expenses. They are like a lot of other animal shelters where the numbers coming in are way more than the numbers going out, which is, they're almost to critical status. So they're trying to figure out, and I think that's all economy related because people don't have money to, pay for food, so they don't have money to pay for their pets. So anyway, that's something that they have to keep working on. Yesterday, the hospital board met. We got a tour of the new pharmacy, which is almost $1 million project. They've actually put it upstairs on the main floor where before it was in the basement in like 3 different areas. It will be a nice upgrade to them. And hopefully in the next 30 days that'll be up and running. They gave us an update on the 9th Street, or the project that they have there at 9th and Main, where you see all the construction going on. That's the first part of their project. When that gets done, then they'll move to the project here in our annex building, anticipating all of that being done around November. And that'll be lots of money and projects, but it'll be a nice facility when it gets done. Just a couple of things. My condolences, or our condolences, to a county employee who unexpectedly lost her husband this last week. And then one of our sheriff's deputies was involved in, his vehicle was intentionally rammed by, at that point, it was a low-speed chase, but he ended up being transported to the hospital, so speedy recovery to him. And that's all I have.
Ron, do you have anything? Don? We got a couple things, got a joint luncheon next week, is that correct?
2 weeks from today.
July 13th.
July 13th, okay.
Yep.
KAC, we got a notification from them for the fall conference in Kansas City. I don't know who's gonna go. I know they're doing reservations now, so.
And
We do have rooms booked for that, so we will be touching base with you guys, get some reservations for the conference itself as we get closer to time. And we did get reservations in the conference hotel, the Sheraton, this time.
Perfect, okay. I attended by Zoom the Heartland's Work meeting. They met the week before, but they didn't have enough for a quorum, but they met yesterday and had a quorum, and it's mainly for procedural things they had to get done. So I'm still learning all about Heartland Works and the work they do. They have one-stop shopping and brick and mortar places. I think the closest one is Lawrence for us. And I don't know, Colt might help me on this because I'm new at this Heartland Works Incorporated. Anyway, it's to me, it's kind of an unemployment office, and they help people get jobs, find jobs, prepare for jobs, and that sort of thing. And anyway, it was a procedure one, and we approved a slate of new board members, 5 of them to be on the board. I really can't talk too much more about it, but it's part of the Department of Labor network for all the states. And anyway, it's to help people get jobs and maintain jobs. So that's all I have. If anybody have anything else today? I'll entertain a motion to.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Aye, aye, aye.